I think if you counted up the actual number of clicks versus the total amount of content back in that last module, you'd come to realize that there really wasn't much in terms of demonstration that we got to see. But that's actually kind of a good thing here with our Veeam backup and replication solution. When you're talking about backups and recovery, you want something that's more or less dead simple. But as with any solution, understanding how best to deploy it and integrate it into your infrastructure is really the most important part of the process. And so for that reason, we continue our conversation here now that we've got the beginnings of our infrastructure now built in this second course in our learning path on Veeam backup and replication, where we start talking about actually using this product in the backup, recovery, and replication scenarios. Here in the second course, we'll take a look at the different components we've installed, those that we've distributed around our network here so far, and get a better feeling for how they work together to complete these different activities. As I said, for a solution that's responsible for, well, protecting your entire infrastructure, you don't necessarily want one that's all that complicated, but you do want to get it installed in such a way that you're fairly confident that any data that should get lost, whether it be an individual file and folder, an application object, or an entire machine, you'll be fairly confident that you can resurrect that piece of data whenever the situation requires it. This is, as I said, the second of the three courses that make up this learning path here for Veeam Availability Suite, where we started first with that initial course there in introducing the product and then implementing it in an initial configuration. That initial backup server installation, along with the different components, sets the stage here for backing up, recovering, and replicating our workloads here using Veeam backup and replication. In this second course, we have 5 different topics I want to discuss here with really 5 different modules, where we start first by, again, going back into the PowerPoint to talk a bit about the different architectures that exist with Veeam backups. I want to take an extra step here and dig pretty deeply into the Veeam backup architecture itself, because once we get into the demonstration, it's not entirely easy to understand what exactly Veeam is intending to do when you make certain configurations. And so this first module here will stick with a pretty long series of PowerPoint slides to help you understand why you would configure your Veeam backups in certain ways. My intention here is that as you exit this first module, you have a pretty good feeling for which of the different Veeam backup configurations makes most sense for each of the different type of workloads that you have. From there, we'll go through the configuration and execution then of some backup jobs. We'll then extend those into replication jobs, and with all that data now stored in our repositories, we'll talk then about how to get it back out, there with our restore jobs. And in continuing with the theme of everything we've been dealing with in the learning path so far, everything up until this point will continue to execute against a VMware vSphere environment. But because the title of the learning path, and you may also need to know how to do this, includes jobs for Hyper-V, I will conclude here with one final module on how all this works for virtual machines that sit on top of the Hyper-V platform. And you might be asking yourself, well, why are we doing all this in VMware just to have one tiny module here for Hyper-V? I do so because the reality is that the differences aren't all that great. As you might have noticed in what we've worked with here so far, we haven't really done much in configuring the hypervisor. Most of our configurations, if not all of them, have been there inside the backup and replication console. And so this last module here is mostly just to show you that the Hyper-V experience, with a couple of important differences, is relatively similar to how all these demonstrations have worked in our VMware environment.